You got the PowerPoint.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. Again, the fourth Thursday is where we normally do an informational session. So tonight we're going to talk about compensatory services as it relates to the special education. And you may ask, what is compensatory services? Well, let me tell you, compensatory services are additional educational services provided to students with disabilities to make up for deficits or lost skills due to a school district's failure to provide the services or evaluation to which the student was entitled. So, with that being said, we're going to open this up and we're going to have Miss Lisa Wilson to go over compensatory services. We have slides and everything. So, Lisa, let me know when you're ready for the slides. Are you ready to go ahead with the slides, Lisa?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, okay, okay. There you go.
Okay, well, thank you. So, the title of our presentation tonight is Understanding Special Education Compensatory Services. Basically, we're ensuring equity and access. That's kind of what this platform is about. And advocacy is a platform that is about equity and access. So, we're going to talk about some of the key concepts and best practices for how you can support your students. Because I am a parent, educational advocate, I definitely have an agenda, but I have to talk about and take it back to the very basics where we talk about disability, because sometimes in our audience we assume that everyone understand exactly what we're speaking of when we're talking about disabilities as defined by the American with Disabilities Act and IDEA. So our agenda is we're going to talk about the foundations of special education. We're just going to touch on it briefly, and then compensatory services. Then we're going to talk about when and why compensatory services are needed, determining and delivering compensatory services, challenges, best practices, and legal considerations. And so for those in our audience that may be new parents, they may be in the group where they're just you just may not, you may have very limited information about special education and what we're actually doing with this platform. So, disability as defined is the ADA and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. They both define disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. A person who has a history or record of such an impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. When we talk about IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, we're talking about a child. This is what separates the definition. We're talking about a child with specific disabilities who, by reason thereof, needs specially designed instruction and related services. And so if you notice in the presentation, I have bolded needs, specially designed, I'm sorry, needs specially designed instruction and related services. And generally, we're talking about when accessing the curriculum. And so when we look at IDEA, there are specific disabilities that qualify a child, for lack of a better word. I'm using the word qualify. And so autism, specific learning disability, You also hear that referred to as SLD, a deaf and blind child, other health impaired. When we talk about other health impaired, we can talk about, I'll give you an example in just a few moments about what that may mean. Um, Deafness, speech or language impairment, emotional disturbance, traumatic brain injury, hearing impairment, visual impairment, including blindness, intellectual disability, and multiple disabilities. These are specifically recognized by IDEA. And so a lot of times some people think, oh, I'm injured, I'm hurt, I have a disability. But the law is very specific in how a person, an adult in a workplace, and then as a child in a school, a public school environment, will be perceived as having a disability. So if you're familiar with your local school district, you know that a child has to be identified and assessed for their disability. And so this is really important because it's all going to tie in at the end when we start to talk about compensatory education and we get into that individualized plan, because all of our children are different. They learn differently. Some of them have different slower rates of learning, and it's a result of a functional limitation of their specific disability. But I just wanted to give our audience, Paula, a refresh of what we're talking about when we talk about disabled children, because I use that term a lot.
That's
Disabled.
important though. That I like the way you broke it down for that.
Yes. And I have a couple of examples in some next slides, and you're gonna understand a little bit more clear of why the ADA and Section 504, why their definition differs from IDEA. You'll understand in the next slides.
Are we going further? Which one?
We're gonna go to where it says federal protections.
Okay.
So this is my soapbox. I'm guilty. This is my soapbox. And the reason you're not going to hear me talk about IDEA a lot tonight, and IDEA, again, audience, is for individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little twisted on that particular acronym tonight. But you're not going to hear me talk about that a lot tonight because, Paula, I have a desire to stretch the imagination of parents who are advocating for their children. And I want to stretch their imagination to understand that their children are covered by layers of federal law. And oftentimes, when you have a disabled student who's receiving special education services, it's very common for a family or for a mom who's advocating to get tunnel vision on IDEA. And I think that that's great. I think everyone should really learn about what IDEA is, the Code of Federal Regulations, understand which sections apply, when you need to invoke certain rights. That's very important. But we are very fortunate, Paula, because our children are not just covered by IDEA. They're also covered by Title II of the American with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. And so most people call it a 504 plan. You'll hear that term, 504 plan. But I just wanted to share, Paula, first of all, there are approximately 7.5 million disabled students in the United States of America. And to me, that is just an absolutely profound number.
Wow.
Of people. And of course, we know it's just a sliver of our overall population. But what the fact of the matter is that, Paula, disabled children and disabled students become disabled adults. And so this is why our advocacy is so important. And we can't get tunnel vision on just an IEP. We have to prepare as parents and caregivers of disabled children. We have to be thinking all the way into the future of what our children's experience in the world is going to be.
I totally agree, Lisa. And I like the fact that you say that because I think that a lot of people they don't really have a full understanding of what the future is going to look like for our special needs individuals. So sometimes they may think that we're over the top, but what they don't realize is just like you prepare for your children to go to college and you prepare for your kids to have families and all of that, we're taking that same time to prepare for our individuals for the future. We don't want them to always depend on us to do things. We're trying to make them as independent as possible. And with that being said, we have to invest in them and we have to ensure that when they go to school that they get same that same input from the teachers and everybody, and they are just as important. So I think that's very important that you said that, Lisa.
Well, thank you, because it's kind of one of my slogans. You'll often hear me say disability rights are human rights, and so I like to remind people that disabled students become disabled adults. And on one occasion, I was fortunate enough. I'm a part of few federally employed women had an opportunity to do a presentation in my workplace, and the question was, what is the workplace going to look like if we just look at autism? I don't mean to stay focused on autism because there's certainly other disability communities, but if you look at the rate of autism right now, I believe it's 1 in every 36 births is resulting in autism. So you have to ask yourself, what is the workplace going to look like, in 18 years, when our children, this next group of children with autism are graduating? Are we going to welcome them into the workplace? Are we going to segregate them? What are we doing as a society to prepare for what I consider to be autism is a public health emergency, a public
Mhm.
health crisis? I believe that's what we're in right now. But what is the world going to look like, and how is the world going to view them? And are we going to welcome this population of people with open arms, or are we going to do business as usual
Mhm.
of
Brilliant.
creating another marginalized community in society? So, yes, I'm a very serious advocate. And I'm very aggressive in my advocacy because, as a caregiver of a disabled child, we don't have the luxury of kind of waiting. You know how some people say, oh, we're going to do a gap year. We don't have the luxury of having gap years. Every single day counts.
It
Every
does.
single.
And every
So I
single
just,
year for as we say, because even though they may some of them stay a little longer in school, they need that time. And I will say for myself, and I've told you several times, Morgan was definitely she was definitely overlooked for a lot of services, and I see the fallout from that now. So for parents that are listening, take this seriously. And I will say, we're talking about compensatory services. They are a great thing, but if you can get that stuff on the front end, right
mhm.
at the very beginning, you don't want to overwhelm your special needs individuals so that instead of them going to physical therapy, for instance, once a week, now you got to do 3 times a week because they were neglected. So we got to really be careful with that, because even though you can get compensatory services and it's a great thing, you still have to realize that your special needs individual has to be the one that receives the services, and they're going to get double or triple the services. So you want to get that stuff done on the front end as much as possible.
I agree, Paula. And so that's
Mhm.
why it's so important in advocacy is, we're preaching advocacy for for your own child. We
Mhm.
don't mind helping out. I'm a dedicated volunteer advocate, but the parent has to take the lead role, and they have to take that lead early, and they
Mhm.
have to be very aggressive about it. So I just wanted to share. Again, I'm purposely shelving idea I purposely have set that on the shelf, and I want parents to stretch their imaginations and stretch out and understand that you have rights beyond idea. So when you're in the IEP meetings, when you're communicating with your school officials, you have to be able to create that framework, and you set that framework out up front. And what happens is it ushers in a level of seriousness in your interactions with the school, namely IEP meetings. But under Title II of the ADA, it is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all services, programs, and activities of state and local governments. Title II requires state and local governments to give people with disabilities an equal opportunity to benefit from all of their programs and services, which I have bolded, and activities. And so this is really important. Most people think the ADA, Paula, applies to adults only. Like when people see handicap parking, when they see the wheelchair ramps, people think ADA. Most people don't understand that it also extends a lot of protections to children with disabilities and special education.
Mhm.
And so essentially, this includes public schools and it also includes transportation. And so with transportation, if you've ever been in a community and you saw like maybe the paratransit where the bus company has door-to-door services for those who are severely disabled, that's that transportation is different from what we're talking about when we talk about transportation as a related service for a disabled student. But the ADA is just it's an outstanding piece of legislation, and I kind of romanticize it a little bit because it really wraps its arm around our children. And so that's why I want parents to understand that you have more than just idea. So when you go into those meetings, you want to be able to use this language and create the legal framework that protects your child. And then you want to communicate that effectively to your IEP team. And then Section 504, and most people call it the 504 plan. 504 plan. That's how most people understand it. But it's actually a section of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. And it also is civil rights protections to all individuals with disabilities in programs that receive federal funding, which includes most public schools. And
Okay.
Section 504 covers all individuals with disabilities as defined and includes preschool, elementary, secondary, and post-secondary education settings that receive federal funding. And you hear me stressing the word all, because these laws are not just for adults. These are for children, and children that are in school and in special education, and children that need accommodations in the public school setting.
But I love, Lisa, that you're even talking about the post secondary because I don't think people know that it extends that far. At one time, I didn't know the different services that the colleges have. That's
Mhm.
amazing. So that's great that most people don't know this, but that is something that if your child requires that, that is
Mhm.
something that most schools are, they do have those accommodations.
Yeah, most schools have an office of disabilities or something similar to that.
Mhm.
So there is always going to be a person in the employ of a school, a college, a university that specializes and is a subject matter expert in accommodations. And so while we generally here talk to, elementary and, middle school kids, where if we have any parents in our audience and you have a child that may have reading difficulties, that may be transitioning into college, it would definitely be my recommendation that you contact the Office of Student Disabilities so that you can ensure that your child has the accommodations that they need, even at the collegiate level. So great. So now we'll move into
Real
one of
quick,
my
Lisa.
examples.
Real quick, Lisa. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to explore like the post-secondary, but do they have like IEPs on the college level? How does that work?
No, the IEP is more or less for our children, the K through, I mean, I'm sorry, child find, because it starts with child find, and then it goes over to graduation. So they would have what you call accommodations.
Mm.
So just to give you a rough example, so if you have a child with a vision problem, then the school will make accommodations to accommodate whatever disability the student presents with. And that could be dyslexia, it could be reading, like Blake has a dyscalculia, difficulty in math, whatever it is. And what's important, sometimes I think they do require medical verification of some sort, but it would just be equivalent to being in the workplace, Paula. They're entitled to accommodations. And
Okay.
so
Now
those
I do
accommodations look similarly to an IEP, but it's not an IEP.
I do remember some people that I know that went to college, they gave them extra time taking tests, they gave them breaks in between. So okay, well that's good to know.
Yeah, it's good. I know we focus on our little ones, but hopefully we do have some parents in our audience that if you don't have a child in college, but a child that may be transitioning in the next year or two, this will be a great opportunity to go to that college or that university and connect with the Office of Student Disabilities so that you can have the accommodations in place when they get there and you're not trying to kind of run behind the eight ball on that. That's something you definitely want to prepare for.
Hmm. Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. So one of the examples, as I was trying to talk about the interplay between IDEA Title II of the ADA and Section 504. So one example would be a student with dyslexia who is not, and the key word, the operational word there, is not performing adequately for his grade level, for his age level. The IEP team agreed that his difficulty with reading is impacting his ability to learn. And so this student is thereby covered under IDEA, Title II of the ADA, and Section 504. So this is a glimpse into letting a parent out there know who may have a child with dyslexia so that they can understand the multiple layers of federal protections that their child has. Okay, if we can go on to the next example. Now, here's a student that may have diabetes, but is performing well. The operational word is performing well without specialized instruction. The student may require an accommodation to take the insulin, to take their shots, to eat their snacks. We know that people with diabetes have to take snacks at certain times. So that would be an accommodation. But this student is performing well, so they don't need specially designed instruction. So therefore, that student would not be covered under IDEA. Because remember, early on in the earlier slides, it's specialized when the need for specialized instruction. That is what triggers IDEA. But here we have a student who has a medical issue, a medical disability, who just requires accommodations to accommodate the disability, but academically, he or she is able to access the general education without a need for specially designed instruction. So Paula, what the essence of these examples are to show you that there's some children that are going to be covered by IDEA. There's some children that are going to be covered by IDEA, the ADA, and Section 504. And there's some children that may only be covered by 504 and ADA. And so that's why it's so important for parents to understand exactly where your child falls so that you can understand what your level of protection is. I'm very fortunate. I say that loosely, but my son is covered under all three, and I routinely and regularly inform and remind the school of that. So recently, I had someone tell me about, IDEA. They were kind of trying to pigeonhole me under IDEA. And so my response was, my child is a child with disability as defined by the ADA. And so he is in fact covered under the American with Disabilities Act Title II, and he is in fact covered by Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. And of course, he's covered by IDEA. So it's very important, and that when you use this legal framework, you're setting the stage, and you're setting a seriousness in your tone of your advocacy. So, of course, we want to be in partnership with our IEP team, but you have to understand that as the parent, it's your responsibility to advocate for your child. Because although we would hope IEP teams would do that, sometimes you're not going to find that level of advocacy in the IEP team. So you have to educate yourself and understand where your child falls under that. Okay.
I love that it's not a one size fits all. And I think being
Yeah.
able to advocate for your child is by you knowing these laws. Because if you don't know IDEA and you don't know 504 and you don't know Title II, and I would be the first to say I didn't know any of that. I tell people that I don't feel bad if you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't know, you don't know. But this is the whole part of advocacy, and this is the reason why it's so important for me to have these sessions, because a lot of what I did not know, it hurt Morgan. So you don't want to be one of those people that say I didn't know that. Learn, understand what your child, how your child is classified, understand if your child should get these services, because if you don't know and time goes on, you find that your child was deprived of these things. But again, compensatory services is a great thing, but if you can get it on the front end, it's even better.
I like the way you keep saying that, because
Mhm.
that, to me, that speaks to the urgency of parents being advocates for their children and going
Mhm.
into the IEP meetings and just engaging and challenging the team. And I don't mean in a personality challenge, but challenging
Exactly.
them to really appreciate the uniqueness of your child, and to looking at the individualized educational plan that's required for your child. And so you have to kind of, you have to lead with the disability, but then you have to follow with the advocacy, because painfully so, you may not find that advocacy in the IEP team. And so you have to be creative. You want to be able to think outside of the box. But most important is knowing the uniqueness and individualized instruction that your child needs, and then being able to articulate for that. And like you said, Paula, if you do that and you have a reasonably calculated IEP, as mandated by the U.S. Supreme Court, the Andrews decision, you have a reasonably calculated IEP, then you wouldn't even need compensatory services. We would hope you wouldn't.
And I will say that I'm glad you're talking about the team. And you know me, I just come clean with people. People, I failed Morgan. I feel like I was a great mom to Morgan. Don't get me wrong. But when it came to educational services and all that she would do, I failed her in a lot of ways. And I failed her because I didn't know. And I am going to say, all the time, it's not that the team is trying to be slick. There are a lot of teams that's just thrown together with people that are not knowledgeable. So
Mhm.
that's where you come in and you start pushing the envelope like, no, no, no. This, no, they're coming under ideas. Some people, I'm not even gonna lie, there were some teams that, and I said this before, and I'm exaggerating, but the janitor was part of the team. But there are people at this table that, and you're, most parents feel intimidated, but you would
Mhm.
be surprised at you coming to the table with your knowledge base. You would be surprised at how that school will respect you. So just a lot of times, and I think we all talk about the intimidation part of going to these IEPs and sitting around a table with people that you feel are so much more knowledgeable than you. This is where advocacy is coming in, because we want you to be a part of the team. But like you say, Lisa, there are times that you got to lead that team, because everybody on that team may not need to be on that team, because they may not have the knowledge base that you think they have.
That's right. And one thing I would say is that culture in the educational district that you choose to, move close to and you select for your children. I think that, if you have a toddler or little one, that is if you have a little one that is disabled, I think that parents, what I would recommend is that parents start those partnerships with the school, even when their children are toddlers. Go
Mhm.
in and meet with the special education department and start building and forging those relationships.
I
Let them
agree.
know and let them know that you want to be a part of the process, and you definitely want to be a part of your child's education. So does that make sense, Paula?
I love it. I love it, because ultimately, like you're saying, your ultimate goal is to try to work with the school as much as possible. But I'd say from the beginning, know your stuff. Don't rely on anybody. And there are some of the, Morgan was there. She had some of the nicest people. And I'm going to be honest, they weren't, I don't think that, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think that they set out to hurt her. But most of these people were not equipped to sit at that
Mhm.
table and help with Morgan's IEP, individualized education plan. They weren't equipped, they weren't knowledgeable. And I will say, and Lisa, you can kind of quote me on this, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the turnover rate in the special education arena is so, I mean, it's constant. It's constant. It's a constant turnover rate. So a lot of the times people are just filling in the gaps with people that may not be qualified. And I just keep saying that because, as everybody knows, I use me for an example. I
Mhm.
did not know. I'm just learning some of these things when Morgan turned 18, when Morgan turned 16. And now I'm still learning some of this stuff at when Morgan is going on. She's 2 weeks from being 21. I'm not ashamed to say I didn't know, but I don't
Mhm.
want anybody else to be in this same situation like this.
Yes. One of my co-advocates in another parent group that I participate in, Miss Alita Jeree Carter, she always speaks to her advocacy being not only for the children, that her children and the children that are similarly situated to her children, but to those children who are still in the womb and the parents don't even know yet
Yeah.
that they may be disabled. And so our advocacy is important. We're not doing this just for our children, we're doing this for our community,
Yeah.
because this is an enormous responsibility and it is an enormous amount of information. And
Mhm.
so I wish that pediatricians would kind of maybe conduct workshops or maybe partner with organizations to start talking about a lot of the things we're talking about now that we all had to learn. We had to learn, years into the process. But I
Yeah.
wish that there was a model, the medical model actually included a lot of this education about special education and about idea, and so parents can become empowered and they can become educated much earlier, even
Oh,
before they get to 3 years old, even before they get to kindergarten, they can walk in and they can be prepared to be meaningful participants and meaningful members of the IEP team. So hopefully our medical model will change, but if not, advocacy is going to continue moving forward.
How about that? I love it.
And so we can go ahead and move on to our definition and purpose of special education. I know that I said that I was going to shelve idea, but I do want to, because I know our listening audience, may need some of this information. So the definition and purpose of special education is special education addresses the individual learning requirements of the student with disabilities to foster their development. And so it's tailored instruction. You saw early on in the slides where we talked about specialized instruction. And it's also related services, and they are adapted to ensure effective education and academic success for all learners. And we're not going to do it today, but we're going to talk about related services in the future, because I think that that's a very critical piece of special education. And sometimes, again, we get so focused on the IEP, we lose sight of some of the related services that provide that extra support, that occupational therapy, that's those services. And then, as you know, I'm currently addressing something in my personal life. Transportation for a disabled child is a related service. So we're going to talk about that more in the
Estimate those things, but you're absolutely right. We can have a session, a podcast just on those, because it's just like somebody taking in the fifth grade and they're taking English. You're not just going to focus on English. You're going to focus on math. You're going to focus on social studies. It's the whole cat and caboodle. So you're right, Lisa. It's the whole pie. You can't take part of it and don't take the rest. I love it.
Exactly. And a lot of times the related services can be costly for the school district, but they do receive federal funding. And so I encourage parents, don't worry, because I've actually heard parents, and I don't know, I see Crystal in the chat. I've actually heard parents saying, well, no, this might cost too much, so I'm afraid to ask for this. But don't let the cost be a burden to you, because the law is on your side. And if your child is in need of specialized services, if your child is in need of compensatory services, if your child is in need of extended school year services, it's up to the IEP team to look at the data and to reach a conclusion that's in support of that child. And so as we just look at our IDEA overview, IDEA, it mandates educational rights for children, for students with disabilities, to ensure access to an appropriate education. And now this next word is something, and Paula, when I first entered school with my son, I had no idea. Someone said something like FAPE. I didn't know what that was. I don't know if FAPE, that's the acronym that is used
Is
in the
that
special
me?
education
Yeah.
world. And I remember going, is that a real word? Is that an acronym?
Okay.
But it stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education.
Yes, I've
And
heard that.
so um, the common use of that term is FAPE. And so FAPE guarantees that eligible students receive education tailored to their individual needs without a cost. And I like to repeat that, without a cost.
Without a
So,
call.
and when we get to compensatory services, we're not going to go too deep into it, but there are different types of it. Sometimes it can be the reimbursement piece, where you go out and take your son to Sylvan Learning and you pay for $1,000 worth of reading sessions. There is an opportunity for you to come back to the IEP team because there was a deficit, it was missed, the skills were lost, whatever the reason is. You can come back, you can actually petition the school district for reimbursement. But I don't want to get too deep into that, because that gets into the legal part of it, where you can get into mediation and you get into due process, and I don't want to use our time for that.
Okay.
So now, as we go into the introduction to compensatory services, the definition is compensatory services provide additional education support to students to make up for missed services. And it's actually a little broader than that. At the onset, I really like the definition that you presented, Paula, because
Mhm.
it is broad. It's not only for missed services, it can be if a child is not making academic progress in a certain area. So we'll just take reading for instance.
Mhm.
um, so my son is still below grade level significantly. And so I was able to lobby for his compensatory hours to be used for him to attend Linda Mood Bell in Washington, D.C. for 6 weeks of intensive one-on-one reading instruction over the summer. And so what I am excited about is that for the first time in quite a while, I saw the needle move. It didn't move a lot in 6 weeks, but it moved. And so I was very proud of the fact that I was able to lobby and get the support of the IEP team to approve for him to attend this very prestigious private learning center.
I love it. I
And
love
so
it.
it's not, yeah, so it's not like miss. So my son didn't miss anything.
Mhm.
In this particular instance, he had hours from a previous letter of finding, but because of his continued deficit in reading, I was able to gain the support of the IEP team to approve that. And so, of course, the legal foundation, our services, these services are ensured that students receive education that are entitled under IDEA and FAPE. So you'll hear the word FAPE a lot, and I'm telling you, it was a word that took me by storm. But one thing I know now is that in every communication with the school, when you're talking about an IEP, if you're talking about mediation, if you're talking about an administrative state complaint, those are definitely four words that you want to lead with. My child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. Or you can just shorten it and say, my child is entitled to FAPE. And if there's a problem with the delivery of the services, then you can say, my child has been denied FAPE. So that's a word and an acronym that you really want to hang on to. So we can fast forward to when and why are compensatory services needed. And so that's what I wanted to tell. I wanted the audience to understand and to think beyond, oh, it's just COVID. The kids weren't able to go to school. There are the definitions, I'm sorry, the prerequisites are much broader than that. And so, of course, a service interruption, something extreme as COVID, is something that warranted compensatory services. I was very disappointed that some schools um, didn't engage in a meaningful individual evaluation of every child that receives special education. So technically, every single child, and remember, we talked about 7.5 million of them, there should have been 7.5 million individual evaluations after COVID to determine if a child required compensatory services because of the devastating impact of COVID. But unfortunately, a lot of children didn't get that assessment. And those that did, some of them, it was just they checked the box, pushed them on along. But there should have been a meaningful individual assessment of every single child that received special education after COVID. And so you can almost understand why those meaningful assessments were not conducted because of the cost that would have likely been attached to that. And so that's I think our schools, some of our schools failed the children after COVID. Um,
Even more. Some of them were already failing him, and then it got even worse. Yeah.
exactly. And then it talks about interruptions in services resulting in learning loss, affecting the progress of a student in a special education um, program. And then also the need for compensatory supports. Identifying gaps is crucial to provide targeted compensatory educational supports to recover lost learning. So this is really important. And so I just want to talk about impact. Um, for example, my child is still reading significantly below grade level. Um, and I have not been able to see the needle move. And so I have engaged and will continue to engage his IEP team when we look at all the data that they've collected, the data from the standardized testing, the needle isn't moving. And so, to me, I'm sorry, in my opinion, I am well within my right to engage the IEP team for compensatory services in the area of reading for my son, because according to the unanimous Supreme Court decision, the 2017 Andrews decision that I love to talk about, that a child, de minimis is no more. Um, Children must make meaningful educational progress. And so it takes a team that's invested to their particular children, the children on their caseload. It takes a team to really demonstrate that investment and say, you know what? We've noticed that Blake really isn't, his reading isn't improving, or it's improving at such a slow rate that, I mean, it's almost difficult to, to really capture. So why don't we offer or extend compensatory services to Blake? Why don't we offer him Linda Moo Bell, um, either in the afternoon, virtual, Saturdays, or during the summer? Why don't we as a team identify the best intervention that can maybe make a difference and move the needle for Blake, and maybe help him move to the next grade level of reading? And so I'm not going to say what grade level he's reading at, because quite frankly, it breaks my heart. But we'll just say he's in the 5th grade and he's reading at a 3rd grade level. We'll just say hypothetically, that's it. And so he's been at a 3rd grade level when he was in the second, I'm sorry, so he's been stuck at a 3rd grade level for 2 consecutive years. That, audience, is a time where you should engage your team and say, my child isn't making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we look at compensatory services to try to close that gap?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is important when we talk about language. And this is why you have to go on YouTube and listen to the attorneys talk about, special education and compensatory services, get the right language. Because what compensatory services are not is not extended school year services. That's very different. So here you can say, I want to help close the gap. When you're talking about ESY, that's not the purpose of ESY. The purpose of ESY is to really stave off regression and recoupment. So again, this language is so important, and you have to delineate between these types of programs so that you can make sure that you get the best and most meaningful response from your IEP team. And so I use that. My son is in the 5th grade, transitioning into 6th grade. He's still at the 3rd grade level. He hasn't improved. It's time for us to look at a meaningful intervention through the tool of compensatory services.
And can I stop you real quick, Lisa? Because again, I like to use me as an example as much as possible, because I don't want people to think that I had it all together. I still don't have it all together. I'm still learning. But I will say this, parents, one thing that I fell short on was, because my daughter has multiple disabilities. Morgan is nonverbal. Morgan has cognitive disabilities. Morgan is physically disabled. There was multiple things wrong. I almost, in my mind, and I'm being honest with you guys, I almost in my mind did not think that she could accomplish anything. So I thought, that kind of going to school was somewhat of a formality. I thought, she couldn't stay home. She had to go to school. So I'm saying this because I want parents to understand this. Um, Never feel as though your child cannot learn anything. And I think when I went to Morgan's IEP meetings, I honestly thought that they were doing the best that they could for her, because when I was growing up, most of those kids were given no hope. And so, what started making me think differently is being around other people, surrounding myself around other parents. I would go to everything that they had, just trying to learn more. But I say this to say, never feel as though your child is not able to learn anything, because I think that will keep you from asking for anything. It's almost like, well, at least they doing the best that they can. So I want you guys to listen to this and truly, truly understand that God did not bring kids here or anybody here to be a doormat. Everybody can learn something. Just
Mhm.
because she didn't learn it at the same level as my son does not mean she couldn't learn it. Morgan had to teach me that she could learn things. I would tell Morgan stuff without the expectation of her even doing it. She showed me she could do it. So I just say that to say that's somewhere where I failed her, because I truly did not understand and know that Morgan was capable of learning just like everybody else. She just had to learn different. So I just always try to be as truthful as possible. And now I let her lead me with the things that she teaches me things. She teaches me things. So I think that's very important, because I think sometimes when you approach in these situations, you approach it with, I don't, well, they ain't gonna learn nothing anyway. I'm just gonna just go ahead and go along with the process. But in fact, they can learn.
Yeah. For me, sometimes I get offended when I'm in IP meetings and they're just looking at me.
Yeah.
They're just looking at me, and you can, if you're a parent of a disabled child, you know what those looks mean.
Exactly. So it's like this is a formality. We're just having this meeting. It's a formality, but yeah,
Yeah,
don't
I don't want to get emotional, but
Mhm.
we know what those looks mean.
Yeah.
And then some people take it one step further and go, well, what do you really see for his future?
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
love that question. Thank
I'm gonna
you, Lisa. You are dropping some jewels. I
I'm just gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it right there because I think that IP team members sometimes, yes, you have to go to these meetings, but for me, it's more than just a meeting. It's me trying to make a difference in my child's life and give him a meaningful opportunity to make some academic progress. He may never catch up to his grade level, and I'm
Mm,
okay with that. But one thing for sure, we are going to make meaningful progress.
I love it. I love it, Lisa.
So
That's
I just
powerful.
want to, I hope that at the end we can talk about some of the comments in the chat because they are really powerful, and it's so important to hear the perspective from our listening audience. But compensatory services, one thing I've kind of purposely stayed away from. If you file an administrative complaint and if you are successful and the allegations against the school district are substantiated, then there will be an opportunity for you to have a compensatory um, services award. Um, and then, at another date, we can talk about that because sometimes that's a quantitative approach. There's a qualitative approach. Is it hour by so
I definitely think we're gonna have to have a part two on this, Lisa, because this is a lot of information, and I don't think I definitely want people to fully understand what this is.
Yes, yes. We have quite a bit, I'm looking forward to 2026. But some common scenarios requiring compensatory services are delayed evaluations. Delayed evaluations can postpone necessary educational support and affect a student's progress. And so that's why it's very important for parents to have their little month, their calendars, and you want to mark down when your child's annual IEP evaluation should take place. And it's very important for you to understand when that triennial takes place, because there are certain assessments that are done at the triennial that are not done at the annual. And triennial, that's every 3 years. But the law states that an IEP should be reviewed and updated and or amended at least once a year. So that's your annual. And so for me, I'll use myself as an example. Blake's annual came up this year. And of course, they kind of waited to the last minute, and it was like, okay, we got to get you to sign and agree to these assessments. It was his triennial. And so they waited so long. They had to gather the tests, they had to do the data. Long story short, the final annual IEP meeting was held on the last day of school, which was June 23rd. And so in my state administrative complaint, there was a finding for a violation against the school district for not conducting the annual IEP meeting in time. And so if you know that your child's annual is in June, you want to start February, March. You want to start reaching out to that team and saying, hey, are there any assessments that we need to conduct? Is there any data that we need to gather ahead of this? You want to kind of nudge them so that you can start that process, because if not, things will be delayed, and that will result in a finding in a state complaint. And then missed services. We've already talked about that. Catastrophic events, COVID. We talked about that in detail. And then IEP implementation failures. And that's what I was talking about with the state complaint. I didn't really want to talk about that a whole lot, because I'm hoping, Paula, that we'll also have a segment. Actually, I like to have a series on state administrative complaints, because I think that it's a tool that parents, that is underutilized by parents. And it's not about being in an adversary relationship with the school, but it's about making sure that the IEP is implemented with fidelity at all times. And when it's not, then there has to be accountability. And that accountability can result in making the child whole as an equitable relief of compensatory services.
Now, Lisa, we have like 2 minutes, so I
I know.
don't. Yeah, I don't, because I'm serious. This is great. I think we should have.
Excited.
Yeah, I think we should have a part two. And I love the way you're taking your time going through this. I don't want to rush this. Do you think we should cut it off here and then we go into part two at determining the rights of students and families? Because that's a lot right there.
Yes. Yes. But this is what I think. I think that I'm so sorry. I think that it's very important and that's why I did a lot of definitions and given the legal background, because most people don't even know what compensatory services are. So they see our title and they're like, okay, what's that? So I like to kind of give you the education that kind of bring you along on the journey to understand how you get to those services. And so I do think that we should stop here, but can we at least acknowledge some of the comments that are in the chat, because it's so wonderful, and thank everybody for taking the time out to listen to us today. We just love our community. I consider myself to be a global special education ambassador, and I will be doing this for the rest of my life.
So Crystal was saying many families opt out of compensatory services because they don't know what it's about and it's not always explained to them. And then just her second comment that says, thank you for, clarifying that compensatory, because people think that compensatory services is ESY and it's not. I like that too. Thank you.
Yes. And Crystal, you'll hear me say quite frequently language, 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 language. You have to be able to articulate your position before your IEP team. You have to be able to use the appropriate language because they're just waiting on you to slip and say the wrong thing. And that wrong
Mhm,
thing can result in a denial of services or denial of whatever you're requesting.
mhm. And building relationships are so important. And I totally agree. I think you said that building relationships from when your child is first diagnosed. I mean, because it's a partnership.
Hmm.
It's very important to build those relationships.
Very important.
And I will say that some of those relationships helped me behind the scenes. There were people that came to me and said, Paul, I know you don't know what's going on, but let me tell you how to do this. So you would be surprised that part of your IEP team, I became friends with everybody. So some people were pulling me to the side. I honestly didn't know what I was doing. And they were like, trust me, ask for this, that, and in between. And I was like, okay. And I didn't know, but years later, it pans out for us. So I will say that everybody on your team is not bad. So you're definitely right. Building relationships is so important. And Gwen, I don't know what you were saying. Yes, you're telling the truth. I think that we were talking about the teams, how there are some people that's on the teams that are not qualified. I know Gwen was she worked in the school system, so I don't know if that's why she said that. And then Velma Brooks said, great information. Yeah, this is awesome information. And I keep telling people, I'm learning. I'm learning, and Morgan is going on 21. So please take this information and use it appropriately. We are here to help and advise people as much as we can.
Yes, we come. I advocate from a place of personal pain, but I am so thrilled to be able to share everything I have learned on this journey because this information is, while it's free and it's on the internet, it's very difficult to
Mhm,
actually apply it to apply it to the IEP process with success.
mhm.
So, all righty. Well, thank you so much, Paula. I look
Thank
forward to
you.
part 2
I
next
look
month.
forward to part 2. That's why I wanted to
Next
stop it
month.
right here because I definitely look forward to part 2. And I thank you so much, Lisa. Y'all, Lisa is very, very, for those that don't know, she is very passionate about this. I saw that when I first met her. And I was just like, I mean, I was drawn to her education and the passion that she has. So I thank you, Lisa, for being a part of our team. And I thank you for taking the time out to, talk about compensatory services part 1.
Part 1. I'll see you next month.
Okay.
Bye
Everybody
bye.
have a good night.